So last week, news broke of two new products for launched by PepsiCo in the Cola carbonates category. There's the 7.5 fluid ounce Pepsi True, which is the stevia sweetened cola carbonate that has 60 calories per can, as well as the full flavored cane sugar sweetened craft soda called Caleb Cola, which is named after Pepsi's inventor. So Howard, these two launches, I guess let's start with Pepsi True. What do you think is unique about this launch from Pepsi, and how do you think the product will do?
Well, I think it clearly follows Coca-Cola's Life launch, which was also launched in the last month or so. So it's not very innovative in that regard.
Sure.
And it clearly does follow this broader industry trend towards the use of stevia to reduce calories and as a substitute for sugar. I think what I find interesting about this launch in particular is the smaller scale than the Coca-Cola Life. It's being trial launched on Amazon.com. I think the advantage of that and of this smaller scale launch is obviously there's a little less investment there, a little more opportunity to gauge interest in whether or not stevia in cola is a viable alternative.
Right. No, I think that's a really valid point. By launching on Amazon, they really minimized a lot of that initial investment in terms of their distribution and can gauge consumer interest before committing long term to a full nationwide rollout, if that's something that sales via Amazon would support. Now, with the second product, this Caleb Cola, what are your thoughts on this being this sort of a craft soda offering from a company like Pepsi?
Well, I think it's more evidence of this fact that it's increasingly difficult to keep people engaged with these big mega brands, particularly some maybe younger consumer types. I think Coca-Cola have had some success in the past year using the package to do so with Coca-Cola, with the Share a Coke campaign, or the glass bottles, the imported so-called Mexican Coke. Pepsi here, I think, have taken a different approach, again, on a slightly smaller scale, to try and design their own sort of craft cola. It reminds me a little of Pepsi Raw, which was a launch several years ago that, again, focused on simplicity and authenticity in the ingredients. But that launch was not successful, so maybe a brand that sort of distances itself from Pepsi, the global brand, might have more success there. I think one of the downsides might be it's a little difficult to convey authenticity, just because of that association with the Pepsi label. So yeah, I think it's an open question as to how successful that will end up being.
How do you feel about Pepsi's strategy so far in terms of what they're doing in the U.S. market?
Well, I think there are really two ways to look at it, one of which is the positive side and then the more negative approach. I think, on the positive, I think they haven't been afraid to be experimental with their new product launches over the past year, and they have been really responsive to the declines that we've been seeing in cola and the declines we've been seeing in carbonates in general. And so they haven't been afraid to take risks, and I've been a big fan of some of the things, especially they've done with packaging over the past year. But if I were to take a more negative view of it, I think there is a risk it could be interpreted as a very scattershot strategy. It isn't quite clear that the direction is healthier launches or whether it's more indulgent, smaller launches. And so I think you kind of have to balance those two ways of looking at it. But it's still very new. And I think it's going to be a little while before we're able to make a determination on how successful it has been.
Great. Thank you, Howard.